3 words changed everything. She's waking up. The antiseptic smell hit first, sharp and sterile. Then the beeping steady, mechanical, alive. I wasn't supposed to survive the surgery. But here I was. What I wasn't supposed to do was hear. Not the hushed voices. Not the subtle shift in tone when they thought I wouldn't make it. And definitely not the quiet triumph in my son-in-law's voice when he said, "It's done." My name is Evelyn Barrett. I'm 73 years old, a retired professor of literature, a widow, and up until 6 days ago, the legal resident of a $3 million home in Westerly Cove, a quiet town where I had planned to live out the rest of my years by the sea. I opened my eyes to a white ceiling and fluorescent light. "She's waking up," a nurse said, too cheerful. Over me hovered my daughter, Lauren, her makeup flawless, her smile strained and rehearsed. Next to her stood Brandon, my son-in-law, glancing at the platinum watch that hadn't been there the last time I saw him. "Mother, you're awake," Lauren said, her voice wrapped in artificial concern. We were so worried. My throat felt like gravel. I couldn't speak, but my brain was working. The last thing I remembered was pot roast, a quiet dinner at home. Then a sharp pain in my head and darkness. "Don't speak," Brandon said kindly. "Everything's been taken care of." Those words stopped me cold. Nothing good had ever followed "everything's been taken care of." I croaked out, "What do you mean?" They exchanged a glance like actors reading from a script. "Well," Lauren began gently, "given your condition, we sold the beach house." I stared, stunned. Brandon added, "The Cape Cod property. The sale went through yesterday." I may have survived the surgery, but something far worse had already been done. And it was only just beginning. For a few seconds, I thought I'd misheard them. The beach house? Sold? The house I'd lived in for over 20 years. The house where I kept my late husband's letters, my retirement journals, and the quilt my mother made in 1953. "That's impossible," I whispered, each word scraping out of my throat like sandpaper. "I never signed anything." Brandon, ever the professional, pulled a folder from his briefcase with the flourish of a magician revealing a dove. "Actually, you did. Right here," he said, pointing to a signature that looked vaguely like mine if you squinted, tilted your head, and had a drink in you. "It's normal to forget things after a medical trauma," Lauren added gently. "The doctors said memory lapses are expected. Short-term confusion is very common." I stared at the paper, willing it to disappear. But it didn't. And I had no memory of signing anything. The last clear moment I had was dinner, the pain, and now this. "You're probably just disoriented," Brandon said smoothly, "which is why we stepped in to handle everything." That phrase again, "we handled everything," like they were doing me a favor. Lauren sat on the edge of my bed and patted my hand. "We found a wonderful facility for you in Illinois. It specializes in stroke and aneurysm recovery. It's peaceful and affordable." "Affordable?" I asked. Brandon smiled. "Well, your medical bills are going to be substantial. We wanted to make sure the funds from the house covered long-term care." I blinked at them. Illinois was 2,000 miles from the ocean. From my books. From my home. "Why not here?" I asked slowly. "There were complications," Lauren said vaguely. "Availability, cost. Illinois made the most sense." But it didn't. None of it did. 6 days unconscious. A major surgery. And somehow, during all that, they'd listed, negotiated, and sold a house worth $3 million. Remarkably efficient, suspiciously efficient. "I think I need to rest," I said. "Of course," Lauren said, kissing my forehead like a loving daughter in a play she'd practiced too often. As they left, I caught a glimpse of Brandon's briefcase. Under his initials was a sleek silver logo. Thornfield Pierce, Real Estate Law. That's when I knew. This wasn't incompetence. It was a plan. The next morning, a new nurse came in to check my vitals. She was younger than the others, maybe in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a name tag that read, Nina Castillo, RN. Unlike the others, she didn't smile politely and walk out. She lingered, checking my IV bag, then double-checking the chart at the foot of my bed. "Mind if I ask you something, Ms. Barrett?" she said quietly. I nodded. "Do you remember signing any documents in the last week?" I froze. "No," I whispered. "I couldn't even lift a pen." Nina gave the smallest nod, as if confirming a theory. She leaned in slightly. "You've had visitors every day," she said. "But yesterday, your son-in-law gave the charge nurse a set of forms. Said it was medical power of attorney and real estate transfer approval. Claimed you signed them." My breath caught. "They never let me read anything," I said. "They said I needed rest." Nina glanced toward the hallway, then lowered her voice further. "Off the record, I've worked hospice and recovery for 6 years, and I've seen this before. Elder financial abuse isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears a Rolex and says we're just helping." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Someone finally saw it. "What can I do?" I asked. She handed me a sticky note, folded discreetly. "Call this woman. Her name's Joanna Monroe, retired attorney. Helps patients review suspicious transfers. Quiet, smart, discreet." I closed my fingers around the note like it was a lifeline. "Thank you," I whispered. Nina stood up, smoothed her scrubs, and gave me a small wink. "You didn't hear it from me." And just like that, the world tilted again, but this time in my favor. The clock had started. If I wanted my life back, I had to move before they did. Joanna Monroe answered on the second ring. Her voice was crisp, controlled. "This is Joe." I explained who I was, slowly, haltingly. She didn't interrupt once. When I mentioned Brandon's name, there was a pause. "Pierce? From Thornfield Pierce?" "Yes," I said. "He's my son-in-law." Another pause. "Then you need to get every document he's touched reviewed immediately." That afternoon, Nina helped me get access to my hospital records and contact the facility's patient advocate. She was careful not to raise alarms, but her presence at my bedside became routine, protective, familiar. Late one night, as monitors hummed and nurses whispered down the hall, I lay awake reviewing everything. The vitamins Brandon brought. The herbal tea Lauren insisted I try before bed. The sudden exhaustion I couldn't explain. And the pain. Not just the aneurysm. The dull, creeping fatigue in the weeks before. The way my vision blurred when I read. The fog in my thoughts. I'd chalked it up to aging, stress, grief. But now it felt like a setup. At my request, the hospital's neurologist, Dr. Alicia Monroe, ran another round of blood work. She returned with a furrowed brow. "You've had elevated levels of a beta blocker that's not part of your prescribed medication." "What does that mean?" "It's a blood pressure drug, but in high doses, especially in a healthy patient, it can mimic signs of stroke, fatigue, even fainting spells." "But I never took it." She looked at me carefully. "Then someone else gave it to you." The world spun. Brandon was the one who brought my supplements. He insisted I let him refill my pill organizer after my hands began to tremble. My own family had drugged me. To make me seem unstable. To push me toward a care facility. And sell my house before I could stop them. I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a target. And it was time to stop playing helpless. Joe was already reviewing the title transfer and power of attorney. Nina coordinated with her to get copies through the hospital's legal liaison. Within 48 hours, we had confirmation. The documents had been forged. And not very well. Joe arrived on a Thursday afternoon wearing jeans, a windbreaker, and that calm, razor-sharp look only retired attorneys seem to carry. She hugged me gently one arm, no fuss, and went straight to business. "I've reviewed the sale agreement," she said, pulling papers from a thick folder. "The notary's signature is bogus. The witness line is blank. And Evelyn, the trust your husband created before he passed, do you remember what it stated?" I blinked. That the house couldn't be sold without my direct consent. "Exactly. It's an irrevocable living trust. The property's protected. Brandon's sale is invalid on its face unless he gets power of attorney with full real estate authority, which he tried to fake." Joe set down a printed copy of the forged power of attorney. My signature stared back at me. Tilted, hesitant, off. I never signed this, I said, voice shaking. I know, and now we can prove it. Joe had already reached out to a forensic document examiner. Meanwhile, she requested an injunction to halt any further transactions tied to the house. Brandon didn't know it yet, but his brilliant plan had a leak. By evening, Nina updated me on Lauren's recent behavior. She's been tense, Nina said quietly. Yesterday she made 3 calls in the hallway, pacing like a caged animal. All I caught was, she wasn't supposed to wake up. My stomach twisted. She didn't know I could hear her, Nina added. The pieces were aligning faster than I could process. The gaslighting, the documents, the sudden push to move me across the country. And now, a crack in the silence. Joe pulled up a chair that night and looked me dead in the eyes. Evelyn, she said, you don't need to go quietly. I'm not going to, I replied. She smiled. That's my sister. In that moment, something shifted. For the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I didn't feel small or frail or broken. I felt angry, clear-headed, alive. And I had a team: Joe, Nina, and soon, a judge. It was no longer a question of if we'd stop Brandon. It was how hard he'd fall when we did. The hearing was scheduled faster than we expected. Joe filed an emergency petition in probate court citing elder fraud, forged documents, and medical endangerment. The judge, to his credit, didn't need much convincing once the initial evidence came in. But Brandon didn't go down quietly. He showed up to the hospital 2 days before the court date. Alone, no Lauren, no fake smiles this time. Evelyn, he said smoothly, pulling the chair closer to my bed, we need to talk. I stared at him, silent. He leaned in. I know you're upset, but this is a misunderstanding. I was just trying to keep things moving while you were recovering. That's what forgery is now, I asked. His jaw twitched. You've been manipulated, he said. That nurse, your sister, they've poisoned you against us. I held up the copy of the forensic handwriting report. This says otherwise. He stood, pacing now, less composed. You're really going to ruin your daughter's life over paperwork? No, Brandon, I said. You already did that. I'm just not letting you finish the job. He stepped closer. You're not in court yet. But I didn't flinch. Let me be clear, I said. You sold a house you didn't own, faked my consent, drugged me, and tried to vanish me into a care facility. You wanted me silent and out of the way. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. You should have made sure I stayed unconscious. That was the last time he tried to talk to me in person. Joe filed an immediate restraining order. Nina reported his behavior to hospital security. And the next time I saw Brandon, it was across a courtroom, his expression no longer smug, but cornered. Lauren didn't show up. She'd gone to stay with her aunt in Connecticut, according to Joe's private investigator. Her signature wasn't on the forged documents, but her silence, her cooperation, spoke volumes. When the judge ruled to freeze the sale, Brandon's attorney asked to renegotiate the terms of the transaction. The judge replied, "You can't renegotiate theft." And just like that, the power shifted. I wasn't the fragile old woman in a hospital bed anymore. I was the plaintiff. And I had just begun. News travels fast in a small coastal town like Westerly Cove. When word spread that a retired literature professor had sued her son-in-law for elder fraud involving a $3 million beach house, the whispers turned into headlines. Joe handled the press with care. She issued a simple statement. Miss Evelyn Barrett stands for every elder who has been silenced, manipulated, or forgotten. This case is not just about property, it's about dignity. Local papers picked it up first. Then a Boston affiliate ran a piece. Then came the interviews, the calls from advocacy groups, and the quiet stream of letters from strangers, mostly women, who said, "That happened to my mother. That happened to me." I didn't ask for attention, but I didn't hide from it either. Brandon, on the other hand, tried to salvage his reputation. His firm, Thornfield Pierce, put him on administrative leave. By the end of the month, his name was quietly scrubbed from the website. Lauren never called. Not once. Not even after the court voided the sale, froze the account holding the wire transfer, and opened a criminal investigation into fraudulent notary certification. Joe advised me to keep my distance. "She's made her choice," she said gently. "If she ever wants to rebuild, she'll have to start with the truth." The truth. That was the core of it. Not revenge, not retribution, just the quiet, stubborn insistence that what happened was wrong, and someone needed to say so, out loud, where others could hear. By April, I was back in my home. The salt air tasted different, cleaner. Nina stopped by once a week with groceries and gossip. Joe set up a small legal resource fund in my name for elder women in financial abuse situations. And the local community college asked if I'd consider teaching a guest seminar on ethical literature. The irony made me laugh. After everything, the thing that healed me most wasn't the court ruling or the media storm. It was knowing that my voice, one quiet, older woman, had cracked something open. That maybe, just maybe, the next time someone said, "She won't fight back," they'd think twice. One quiet Sunday morning, a letter arrived. No return address, no handwriting I recognized, just my name, Evelyn Barrett, written carefully across the envelope. I opened it with the same caution I'd learned to apply to most things lately. Inside was a single page, folded in half. It was from Lauren. The handwriting was hers, neat, precise, just like when she used to label her school notebooks in 3rd grade. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. I just need you to know I was afraid. Afraid of losing the house, afraid of the medical bills, afraid of growing old and watching you fade the way Dad did. I let Brandon take over because he always said he had the answers. I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I told myself it wasn't that bad, that you'd understand, that maybe you wouldn't wake up. I hate myself for thinking that. I hope someday you can live in peace, even if I'm not part of that peace. Love. Lauren." I stared at the letter for a long time. It didn't make anything right. But it was something. I didn't respond, not yet. Some wounds aren't ready for stitching. Some apologies need time to settle before they can be accepted. Instead, I tucked the letter into my desk drawer, beside my husband's will and the trust documents. A reminder of how close I came to disappearing, and how I refused. Later that week, I stood on my porch overlooking the sea. The wind off the Atlantic pulled at my scarf, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was bracing against a storm. I felt rooted, here, alive. If you're watching this and you've ever felt erased, let me tell you. You are not invisible. You are not too old or too much or too late. You still have power. Speak up, ask questions, get help. And if someone tells you, "Don't worry, everything's been taken care of," make sure you ask, taken care of for who? Because your story isn't over. Not yet.